Alhamdulillah, now we have people who think, I mean, we went to history and start cleaning up these, I can't say misunderstanding, but because it's spread out in the culture a lot, in the fiqh, in the seerah, in the hadith. And there's big scholars, so-called scholars, mashayikh, who are still telling the same story. They killed Bani Qurayza, everybody, and we took the woman. And this is, I think, doesn't, this is contradict Islam in the core. That's not acceptable.
Okay,
And
Dr. Said with us, I think he's listening and he can talk about it.
Yes, but I think I would like to welcome Brother Uzair. He is from our community at Adams, and he is joining us today. And I would like for him, if he wants to ask any questions or to comment or anything, I would give him the priority first.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. But no questions. Just as they say, first time caller, long time listener, first time caller. So this is, I've been hearing about Mr. Ghannouchi for some time. So this is my first time listening in. So I'll just be a good student and listen in for now.
Jazakallah khair.
There's no sound. I can't hear anything.
We cannot hear you, Dr. Said.
Yeah,
Okay, it's good right now.
yeah, I didn't get the full question, the full comment. I mean, I got some from Brother Muhammad. Is this something that you want to discuss or what?
Yes, what I mentioned is there's a big two research. I think it's from two doctors in Islamic study, Islamic history and seerah, and the other one in hadith. And their research came out to the story that we know about what happened with Bani Qurayza is incorrect. The number who were killed, only maybe a very small number, only the people who did the crime. But none of the kids, none of the women were, maybe one woman for some reason, but then they released her. And the story that we heard when we were kids in the school, that every man was killed, and even the, balighin, the kids who was like 12 or 13 or something, were killed too. And to me, that's injustice. That's how come Islam is calling for rahmatul alameen, mercy to everybody. And when you go to people, this is general punishment. You cannot punish innocent people because their fathers or their family did something. That's my question.
Allah, yeah, brother. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. It is very unfortunate that I mean, I said this also a number of times, that the damage that Muslims have done to Islam is bigger than anybody can do. A lot of time we complain that people are conspiring against Islam, but the damage that we have done, and a lot of time out of good intention, is bigger than any damage that anybody can do. The books of Sirah, the books are full of stories that are not, that were never validated. And I really invite people to read the story of how the books of Sirah were written, how they were written and when. And I don't know how we came to accept that the book of Ibn Ishaq or Ibn Hisham as a really very authentic book, and full of story that never happened, full of exaggeration, full of everything. I mean, that doesn't take anything away from the intention of these people. I mean, people had good intention. They want to document the life of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But unfortunately, the good intention is not enough. It was not done right. And this is one of the incident. Another incident that that until now I don't know why people are sticking to it, even though there are studies that prove that it is wrong. That Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam married Aisha radiallahu anha when she was 8 or 9 or 6 or whatever. Nonsense. And even the people go and do scientific studies, I mean, methodically, and prove that cannot happen. She couldn't be at that age. And then you have scholars who, as if it is, they made it part of the deen. That if you question that, the whole Islam may collapse. So you have to stick to it, and you have to defend it, and you have to say, you have to come up with excuses. But at that time, girls, they mature early, and then all of nonsense. I mean, at least as soon as somebody has done a good research and proved by number of proofs that Aisha could not be at that age, Yazidi abandon it, forget about it. And we're not lacking areas that people are using it to attack Islam. Don't give them more ammunition. At least when we get one thing out of the way, at least we should, at least one thing less to worry about, but you have people who keep defending it, etc. This is Bani Qurayza also. I'm aware of research that was done that proved that it did not happen that way. There is no such thing that Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam killed or executed a whole tribe. It's really not consistent at all with our religion. It's not consistent with the nature of the Prophet, etc. And you find people who take it as if it was in the Quran, and then it becomes true, and they defend it. And some people are proud of it, and some people are used it as an excuse to do the same thing now. Total mess. By the way, this is for books of Sirah. It's very, things are very clear, because books of Sirah were not written in any methodic way, very, very haphazard work. If it was like somebody has done that as a thesis, it will be rejected completely, because you just go and write stories that you never verify and you never double check, etc. And then you end up with mixed bag. You don't know which one is correct and which one is not. But that applies also to the books of Hadith, which until now, some Muslims, they consider them taboo, that nobody should even come close to them. And if you come close, you may be also, your iman might be questioned. People can probably accuse you of a number of things. But even that, the books of Hadith, they're not Quran. Yes, they were done in much better way. There is no question about it. There is no comparison, especially the Sahih, the books, the more authentic books. There is no comparison between those books and the books of Sirah. No comparison whatsoever. At least there are a lot of efforts that were done there to verify. It's not like any stories will be put in the books. But even that, it's still a human effort. And there are some hadith that are not appropriate. The Prophet could never said this, and could have never done this. And we, as if now it's more important to prove that Bukhari or Muslim did not make any mistake, even if it involves something that is degrading to the Prophet. That's the level we reached, that we are so afraid to say, no, this hadith is questionable. At least we keep it there because we are afraid, and I'm going to come to this in a minute. We are afraid to challenge the status quo, or the dominant version of Islam, to the point that nobody can say a hadith in Bukhari is questionable, even if that hadith is hurting Islam and hurting the Prophet. So that's where you can see how far we have gone. And all of this, especially for the books of hadith, it was because of one or couple of scholars who came after Bukhari and who took that methodology which is that any hadith in Bukhari is correct and authentic, even if we have to twist the interpretation of the Quran, and even if it comes to say that hadith supersede the Quran, yansakh. Just one or few people who established that school, that the starting point, if there is a hadith in Bukhari or Muslim that's authentic, and then we have to do everything, change or come up with a different interpretation of verses, or even if there is a contradiction, we say this hadith came after this verse, so it supersedes that verse. And then you have a whole history. Muslims keep living under this impression. Why? Because we don't have real scholars. What we have is people who are afraid to say, well, even sometimes what they believe in, because they are afraid of the reaction, because there is a taboo and there is a dominant school and nobody come close to it. Alhamdulillah, yani, recently or every now and then, there are scholars who are brave enough and have the courage to challenge that. And probably only very recently we have seen mainstream scholars who say that Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam never attacked anybody, was never involved in an unprovoked war, like you go and attack a tribe and tell them that you either come to Islam or we're going to take your women and children and your properties, etc. Only very recently, there are people who dare to say that. I mean, I'm talking about mainstream scholars who say there is no jihad talab in Islam. There is no such thing as when you are stronger, then you go out and attack everybody you can attack, and then give them the options. They either come to Islam or take their properties and their women and everything as prisoners of war or sabaya, etc. Only recently, some mainstream scholars start to say that there can be ijtihad even if in a clear text, because for centuries Muslims lived under the impression that there can be no ijtihad in something that is mentioned not only in Quran and even in Hadith. It is mentioned, then there can be no ijtihad. Ijtihad is going to happen for where? Yeah. So we start hearing that no, even the text can be contextualized, and if there is a contradiction between applying the text literally and serving the greater good, then the greater good it takes the priority. Even though this was very clear in the minds of the Sahaba. Umar ibn Khattab, in the same period of time and the same part of the world, few years after the death of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, made big ijtihad, big, about things that are mentioned explicitly in Quran, or about things that the Prophet ﷺ has done. But because time has changed and the conditions have changed, we always have that fear that Islam, as if Islam is, those babies that are born before, what they call them, prenatal, not prenatal. The babies, they put them in incubators.
Immature.
Yeah. I think we have that impression that Islam, as if it's that a baby in incubator, that anything that we do may cause Islam to die and collapse. Islam much more robust than this. It's much more solid and much more robust than that. If we say that there are a couple of hadiths or there are a few hadiths that are, yes, in the Sahih, but they're questionable, nothing is going to happen to Islam. Yeah. It's actually the other way around. We'll make it stronger. Yeah. We'll make it stronger and more appealing and more inspiring and more empowering, rather than spending all our energy defending or justifying a hadith that is questionable. Big mess was done, unfortunately, by Muslims to their religion. Unfortunately, was out of good intention. But freezing ijtihad was the wrong thing to do. accepting dictatorship for stability was the wrong thing to do. Putting the human work of the people who wrote the books of Sirah of the Prophet or the books of Hadith and make those like the Quran that nobody can question anything there, that was totally wrong. It doesn't take anything away from the great effort and the noble effort that Bukhari has done and Muslim and others to say that out of 600,000 hadith, they reviewed and they chose those few thousands. Their work was not 100%. Nothing, that takes nothing away from their great effort and noble effort that they made. That yes, it's like even in a lab, you conduct an experiment, it doesn't come 100%. It's a human effort. There is always a margin of error. There might be hadith that Bukhari has missed, and there might be hadith that were put there, they were not authentic. Yes, Brother Muhammad, you raise your hand.
I mean, yes. The same talk in here. Last week, I mentioned to the brothers the story of Imam Malik. Imam Malik wrote the book which is called Muwatta. Maybe it's the first book in Hadith. And if you look at the numbers of Hadith in Muwatta, it started with about 12,000 Hadith or 9,000. There is, various numbers. But Imam Malik, after that, every year he will look at it and review and do some evaluation, then he will remove until it became less than 700 hadith. Then total actually was 666 hadith. Imagine, from 12,000 to 666. So Imam Malik was before Bukhari and was before Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So, the problem I see here, the people who come and talk in the Jum'ah and Masajid are not actually scholars. They are maybe Hufaz, they memorize the Quran, but they have no critical thinking. Not everybody, but I'm sure there is some. But the thing is, we just mention stuff sometimes that contradict Quran without even thinking, and we don't have the courage to say, oh, let us look at this hadith. Maybe there is something wrong with it. So methodology of Imam Malik has a lot of weight in Islamic, fiqh and Islamic thought in general. And I don't see anybody mentioning that, only maybe some scholars here and there. But I just wanted to mention this in the same subject.
Yeah, and then in the same subject, Bukhari received, I don't know how many thousand hadith from Abu Huraira, and he rejected most of them, actually, more than half of them, did not accept them. It was great human efforts, but never perfect. And now I really understand why the Prophet ﷺ prevented people from documenting hadith. You can understand that because Rasul ﷺ did not want hadith to mix with the Quran. But why Umar ibn Khattab prevented people from writing hadith? He prevented people from writing the hadith. And he said the reason. He said that because I'm afraid you're going to become busy, that Muslims will be busy with the hadith and forget about the Quran. And that's exactly what happened. And now, I mentioned this also, abandon the Quran and get busy with the hadith. And then abandon the hadith and get busy with the books of Torah or heritage books. And that's what we're doing now. You have scholars or people who give speeches, and they rarely mention even hadith or Quran. They also, Ibn Taymiyyah said this, Ibn Hanbal said this, said that, said, etc. So there are two barriers now between us and the Quran. Rather than encouraging people to study the Quran and create some dynamics for reflection on the Quran and trying to extract more of the Quran to inform and guide our lives and solve our problems, etc. Now Quran is abandoned, and then the hadith was also abandoned, or at least there is no appropriate attention given to hadith. There are some essential hadith that rarely anybody mentioned them. And there are some hadith that are not as essential, and you can see them emphasized all the time. And then even that hadith was abandoned, and then people were, I mean, we made the same mistake of our faith community that have done before. We created clergy in Islam. We created clergy in Islam, and we made Muslims believe that they are not equipped to understand their religion. They just have to rely on scholars. So you should not, you don't need to, and you cannot study the Quran by yourself or the hadith. So what do? We rely on the scholars. That's exactly what other وَرَهْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا. There is no clergy in Islam. There is no such thing that someone stands before you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The greatest scholars on earth come to tell you something, you ask for evidence. Don't take anything for granted. Otherwise you become worshipping. Because that's the explanation of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The explanation of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a verse in the Quran, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about people, about Jews and Christians, say that they took their rabbis and their priests as gods, meaning they're worshipping. اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله والمسيح ابن مريم. This is okay, just the verse exactly. So Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was reciting this verse, and there was one of the companions who used to be Christian, said, "O Prophet of Allah, we never worship them." It's Surah Tawbah, verse 31. There is Surah Tawbah, which is Surah 9, chapter 9, verse 31. They take their rabbis, their monks, and Christ, the son of Mary, as Lord besides God. So this person told Rasul, the Prophet, that we never worship them. How come you say we took them, we worship them? And Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained. He said, didn't they, whatever they tell you, they take it, do you follow it blindly? He said, yes. He said, exactly, that's your worship to them. If you follow somebody blindly, whatever they tell you, you do it, that's worship. And unfortunately, even though we were warned against these things, we committed the same mistakes. Anyway, it is never too late for us to accept, to admit that we have done the wrong thing for centuries by being lazy, by freezing our intellect and relying on the work that was done centuries ago and thousands of miles away in a completely different context, different culture, etc. It was the wrong thing to do. And we failed our main duty. Our main duty is, remember, I always say that this religion was kept relevant before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending new messenger with a new message that is suitable for those people and that time. That continued from Adam alayhi salam, from Nuh to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. طيب. After Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a text that is valid for all times and all places. And he promised to preserve it. He did not preserve the previous ones because those were suitable only for that context. So Allah revealed the book and he promised to preserve it, and he did. But he gave us the task, assigned us to the task to do the same job as before, to keep it relevant. to keep it relevant by producing not a new book, not a new message, no new prophet after Muhammad SAW, but by producing a new understanding, fresh understanding that is suitable for your context. And it should not be taken to any other culture and should not be taken to any other era. That's it. It is suitable for you. Most American Muslims develop their understanding of Islam that is suitable for them. And they develop literatures. They develop interpretation of the Quran. They develop interpretation of Hadith. They select which Hadith are more applicable to their context. They select which verses are more applicable. And they produce that wealth of literatures and they raise generation on that. And then they keep refreshing it. Because even if you do that task, if you do it right and you don't keep refreshing it, also it will be outdated. And then Muslims somewhere else, they have to do the same thing. There is no such thing as you take the books that were developed by American Muslims in their context, and then you go to translate them to Arabic and use them somewhere else, or translate them to Spanish and use them in South America. No. Everybody has to do their job. It's so clear. Again, if you compare the era, the time before Muhammad SAW, fresh message by indigenous messenger from them. Rasul, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a messenger from their own people with their own language and with a message that is suitable for that context, and then did not preserve it. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want that message to be taken somewhere else and applied in a very different context. And then comes the seal of the prophets with that guidance that is very inspiring, but Allah assigned us the other duty, which is to keep it relevant. He promised to preserve the text. He assigned us the job to keep it, to contextualize it, to keep it relevant, and to develop and produce fresh understanding that is suitable, that will make Islam anywhere in the world indigenous religion, not an imported religion or foreign or something that is coming out of a museum. It's an indigenous, and it is modern, it's relevant. It addresses the nowadays. Well, I feel very sorry for our young people who go to the masjid. These young people are facing so much challenges in school and in everywhere. And then they go to the masjid and none of this is addressed. The imams are talking about problems that do not exist anymore, talking about stories that are totally irrelevant. It's in a different world. And then we blame why young people are not coming to the masjid or why they are deserting Islam, or it is about time to accept. It's okay to fail your duty and to accept, or to be in crisis and accept it. It's not okay to be in denial or to continue doing the wrong thing. These are major turning points in history of Islam that resulted in what you see, resulted in this dominant Salafi version of Islam that has affected almost everybody, and to some degree or to another. And then it's not producing anything. It's not producing success stories. We don't see any Muslim society that is really model, that you can use as a model in this world. And it's producing, I don't know now, probably 2 billion Muslims whose contribution to the world and to civilization is very, very minimal, very almost insignificant. And as much as we feel bad and sad that this has happened and continued to happen for so long, it's never too late. If there are serious people who are willing to do this work of revival and renewal. And then it's not easy. It's challenging. It's risky. It's like any change is going to be met with resistance, because people, they are in a comfort zone. They have a very convenient version of Islam, and they don't want to hear anything else, because people like convenience and people like comfort zones. It's doable. It's doable if there are people who are serious to start a movement of rediscovering our faith from the roots and make it really, again, not only relevant, but inspiring and empowering, and producing role models, individuals, and model and leading communities, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted the community of believers to be.
Are you done, Dr. Sir?
Yeah.
For questions. So, brothers, if anybody has any comment or question, please. I mean, since nobody has any question, actually, Quran, when it was revealed to Sayyidina Muhammad, it wasn't given at like one package, take the Quran as a whole. It was actually revealed based on the incidents that happened. So that tells us something, that we have to understand that the Quran was like a reaction between wahi and reality, waqi. So same thing today. I mean, we cannot just say take it as a rigid instructions or standards. No, there is in the Quran, there is overarching goals that can be applied to the reality. So we cannot just take what it was said. I mean, I'm agreeing with totally agreeing with what you mentioned. What it was written thousand years ago or 500 years ago in different reality. So it has to be matching the reality that was. I mean, it's not. It has to be with the overarching goals, with the maqasid. So there is maqasid ulya in Islam, high overarching goals like justice, freedom, whatever it is. I mean, you know better than me, but that has to be within that understanding. So that's the nature of Quran. It came based on the incidents that happened during Sayyidina Muhammad's life.
It's yeah, you're right. It's I mean, probably the first thing that we need to do is to accept again the what happened, and that was wrong. And then the first thing to do is to understand that couple of things that are very essential, that they can be used as a foundation to develop a fresh understanding of Islam. One is that the fact that Quran is valid for all times and all places, it does not mean every verse of the Quran is valid for all times and all places. It doesn't mean that. And I use the example of pharmacy. Quran has the ingredients, has some solutions and some ingredients of solutions that are suitable for all times and all places. But people need to do some work on those. They're not packaged already. They're not ready. And I use the example of pharmacy. I mean, in a pharmacy, you have all medicine for all the illnesses. But does it mean that you can take any medicine, give it to any patient? No. I mean, the medicine that can cure a person can kill someone else. Or the medicine that can cure a person, if it is given in a certain dose, if it is given in a different dose, can cause problems. Same thing in the Quran. It is valid for all times and all places, but most of the Quran is guidance, guidelines, not like solution to math problems. It's not equations. Most of the Quran is to inform life, to guide life, to enlighten our intellect and guide our intellect so that we don't deviate and we don't waste time on things that we're not equipped to do. So Quran give us the ghaib, the part that we have no capacity, no ability to do, which is like Allah, life after death, etc. All of these things we rely completely on the Quran. When it comes to this life, it's mostly guidelines, it's mostly inspiration, more than rigid things. That's one. The other thing is what Brother Muhammad just mentioned, is that we have to keep in mind that Quran was doing two things at the same time, and they are not easy. Quran did them in very eloquent way. Quran was revealed to address issues and problems and incidents that took place at that time. At the same time, Quran was revealed to inform and guide life at all times. That's why in Quran, there are verses that are foundational principles, but there are verses that are contextual. They apply only to that context or maybe to similar context, but you cannot apply them everywhere or in every context. So unless we make that distinction, unless we realize that Quran was doing these two things at the same time, was meant to inspire Muslims and guide them and inform their lives all the time in all contexts, but also was revealed to address incident and challenges and issues that existed at that time. And without that distinction, we're going to create a lot of mess and confusion, because then we're going to start taking verses and apply them in a completely different context, or take contextual verses and elevate them to make them foundational verses, even though they are contextual. Like, now, give you an example. Muslims in America, or American Muslims, they live in a country where freedom is guaranteed by Constitution. Not only freedom of worship and conscience and speech and da'wah and everything, and run your own affairs and establish your own Islamic center, and nobody even come near to you to bother you. In this context, all the verses of fighting and qital, they are not applicable. Does it mean we need them to remove them out? No, they are in the Quran. Why? Because they might be applicable somewhere else. They might be applicable, like, for example, I mentioned there's imagine this country is attacked by a foreign country, and people want to be mobilized to fight to defend it. Muslim can use those verses to mobilize their own communities. And because defending your land or defending your property and defending your honor or whatever. So that's just an example of how things, that number of verses that were mentioned about qital, even though the verse that I think it's foundational about this particular issue is the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, and fight those who are fighting you. وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا. That's the verse that is not emphasized, and we take the verses that I believe they are very contextual. They apply to that context of hostile environment and in which the community of believers was there when Quran was revealed, and may apply to similar contexts, but not وَقَاتِلُوا, fight فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, those who are fighting you. And that's what Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did. And now, again, we hear it from mainstream scholars who dare to say that there is no jihad talab in Islam. There is no such thing as you go and fight people just because they are not Muslims. There is no such thing in Islam. La ikraha fi ad-din. That's a principle. That's a foundational religion. Allah did not impose a religion on people. You are going to impose it? No. I mean, Allah left it for people to choose and to be responsible for their choice. and did not, even the Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah tells him that your job ends in balagh, delivering the message. Innama alayka al-balagh. Your job exclusively is to deliver the message. Wa alayna al-hisab. But judging people, that's for us. It's not even your job to convert them. It's not the job of a messenger or a follower or a believer to convert anybody. Never mind to judge them. Never mind to whatever, to force them or force religion on them or harm them just because they refuse to accept religion. Where do you see this? And all of this was done in the name of Islam. It was done in Iraq. It was done in Afghanistan. It was done in different parts of the world and parts of the history.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
For some reason, I really feel like to ask the question because I feel like it's relative. It's like, what is the lessons learned from Surah Al-Kahf, and more specifically, the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam with Al-Khadr, our Rajul al-Salih? And if there is an easy way to understand the complexity, because it's a surah Al-Kahf is a surah that we're supposed to read every Friday. But personally, I'm having like, every time I read it, I have something new to ask about. And it's more complicated every time than it's like, it's not as simple to understand everything. It's like demolish a wall, demolish a boat, or mess up a boat, or if they didn't provide us food, they are cheap, but they still build a wall. It's like all kind of different things that and lessons can be learned from that simple story. Is there a way, first of all, to figure out an easy way to understand the whole surah? Is there hadiths? Because I heard from some of the things that I looked at that there is hadiths, authentic hadiths that's relative to the surah or to the story that adds into the story. It's like, what is the best way, and what is the lessons learned, and how I, as a reader, should understand it from your experience? Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. I think this is, we can dedicate a session on Surah Al-Kahf. I mean, you have seen that sometimes we spend the whole session on one page of the Quran, and Surah Al-Kahf is about 10 pages. So we can dedicate a session for that or more. But in general, first of all, it's good that you are trying to understand Quran and not just read it, because that's unfortunately what many people are doing. They are limiting themselves to reading and maybe memorizing and listening to the Quran, but they don't do the most important thing that is more important than all of this, which is to study it and to understand it. But in general, the stories, there is a verse that tells us that those stories are meant for us to draw lessons. So the specifics are not very important. لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ. That these stories, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in those stories there are lessons. So we should focus more on the lessons that are useful for us in our life, more than the details. One of the lessons, of course, that even a prophet like Musa alayhi salam didn't know things and found somebody who is more knowledgeable, or was was seeking someone who can mentor him. And that's a big lesson that is a lot of people fail today to apply it, which is no matter how much knowledge you have, you still have a lot to learn, and you should be ready to learn from anybody. I personally rarely or never interacted with someone and did not get something, did not learn something. Even if that person is illiterate, even if they have very limited knowledge or experience, they sometimes will give you lessons of life that you will not find it in any book that you may read. So that shows one. Second, shows the patience. Story of Musa alayhi salam, that if you are following somebody who's mentoring you, etc., you have to be patient and not to be always reactionary and always so being patient in learning. That's another lesson from the story of Musa alayhi salam. It's not very applicable because Khidr, the man with whom Musa interacted, whether he was a messenger or was just a righteous person, most of what he did was inspired, was not done out of human knowledge, but was done because Allah told him to do that. So and that will reduce the amount of lessons that we can learn, except that there are things that may happen to us in life and Allah has a wisdom behind them and we don't see it. That's what happened to Musa alayhi salam in the examples that you mentioned, whether it is the ship that Khidr made dysfunctional, or the person who he killed or whatever, but he explained that at the end when he said وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي ذَلِكَ تَأْوِيلُ مَا لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا وَمَا فَعَلْتُ عَنْ أَمْرِي, like I was not acting on my own knowledge or my own judgment. So probably these are some of the lessons that can come to me to mind immediately. One is that you should be very thirsty for knowledge and seek anybody who has knowledge and try to pick the minds of the people, no matter how knowledgeable you are. Second, in seeking knowledge, you have to be patient. And third is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a wisdom in everything he does, but sometimes we don't see it. And sometimes we feel bad that we lost something and maybe that thing was not good for us. Or we feel bad that Allah does not give us something, and those in this, that's what Musa alayhi salam was disturbed when he saw things, they don't make sense. So why are you doing them? And then the explanation was very convincing, especially the ship. He actually was doing a favor for the people who are working on the ship, because there was a king who takes those ships. So when he made it dysfunctional, the king is not going to take it. So these people can keep it and can repair it and use it. كان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا. So, and the wall, I mean, you go to a village or a town and the people were not really, did not host you, were not generous with you. They فأبوا أن يضيفوهما. And then you find a wall that is about to collapse. That's what Khidr found. And then he put it back. He fixed that wall. And Musa alayhi salam was angry. I mean, these people were not nice to us. Why you do that? And then there is the wisdom comes that there is underneath that wall, there is a treasure or kenz. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants those children, because their father was a righteous person, wants those children to grow up and take that. And if he left the wall, the collapsed wall, maybe other people will take that from the children. So these are few things that come to mind. And Quran is, no matter how much you get from it, you always can get more. And until the day of judgment, we will keep, if we really put the effort, we will keep extracting from the Quran things that are really amazing, can make our life much better, can make our thinking much more clear and sharp, and give us a lot of wisdom in dealing with life and life issues and challenges.
Aaron. But the other thing that just come to mind, and as simple as it is the repeatable, or how many times he repeated the same question. Although he had communicated, it's like he had two-way communication between Khadr and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he continued when he saw something wrong, he saw something that it wasn't convincing, he continued to ask the question. And that's what amazes me about this whole story, about like the different stories. It's like, regardless to even with all of this communication, he kept repeating, wanted to understand why this has happened.
And that's the only way you can learn. The only way you can learn is to ask questions. A lot of science discoveries were made out of questions. And that's why I say even average Muslim should contribute to the effort of ijtihad, at least by raising questions. Because when raising questions can create some dynamics and can force or put pressure on scholars to do their work. But if you have a community that is following blindly, then even the knowledgeable people and the scholars become complacent. Because if they're not challenged with the questions, what will motivate them to do more research and study, etc. So it's a lesson that Musab were not accepting were not taking anything for granted. I mean, yes, you are a very knowledgeable person and you're given some inspiration, but we need to understand. And by the way, that's exactly the attitude of the companions with the Prophet ﷺ. It's one of the amazing things in the relationship between the Prophet and the companions, that Rasul ﷺ trained leaders, not blind followers, to the point that they used to ask and question. But always before they question anything or they challenge anything that the Prophet said or done, they ask him that typical question: is this a revelation? And that's what probably Musa did not ask. Is this a revelation or this is your judgment? Because the companions understood from day one, even though they were simple people, but they understood this deen so deeply that the Prophet has two roles in one. In one role, he was receiving revelation and conveying it. And in that role, nobody can question him. But the other role, that he was the leader of the community. And in this role, no, there is consultation, there are different opinions, there is disagreement, normal. And he trained his companions in doing that. There are a couple of incidents in the life of Rasul ﷺ that tells you how he trained his companions. First of all, the fact they dare to ask, that tells you how as a leader, he trained them and encouraged them to do that. In the Battle of Badr, when Rasul ﷺ decided on the place to camp, and here, very average companions, we never heard about him in any other context, except in this context. He came and asked, is this a revelation? Did you choose this place because Allah told you? Or this is your choice? I'm here, Rasul said, no, it's my choice. The companions said, that's a bad choice. ليس هذا بالمنزل. And it's a very bad choice. So what do? He said, and then he explained, he gave an alternative and he explained that the Rasul ﷺ asked the people to follow the choice of this Sahabi, of this companion. The other was in the Battle of Ahzab, when the Muslims were besieged in Medina completely from all angles, and the Rasul ﷺ felt very bad that he caused all this distress to the people of Medina, because it's because of him, that all these tribes, they allied and come to basically wipe out the Medina. So Rasul ﷺ felt bad and he wanted to do something to alleviate the suffering of the people of Medina. It tells you how decent and how sensitive Rasul ﷺ was. Very different from the way it's presented in some books as someone who is fighting all the time and killing and etc. So sensitive. I mean, when you feel that you cause you are burden on people. So he went and tried to make some arrangement with some tribes so that they come out of the alliance with the Quraysh. Basically, the confederate al-Ahzab become weaker because those tribes will abandon. So he arranged with them, told them that basically they take 1/3 of the crops of Medina, of the dates, and then they abandon Quraysh. So they don't participate in that attack. But he told them, this is just preliminary agreement and I need to consult with the Sahaba, with the companions. So he went and consulted with the leaders of Medina, the Sa'd ibn Mu'adh and Sa'd ibn Ubadah, both, or Sa'd ibn Mu'adh by himself. By the way, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh that we keep mentioning with his stance that he took, he lived only 6 years as Muslims. And he died at the age of 37. He became Muslim at the age of 31. So 6 years. All the difference he made only during 6 years. So Sa'd ibn Mu'adh asked exactly the same question. Did you do this as wahi, revelation, or this is something that you did for us? And the Rasul said, no, I did it just because I thought I saw how much you're suffering because of me and because of this. And Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, as soon as he realized this is the Prophet behaving as a leader, not as a messenger, he said, no, they're not going to take anything. They were not able to take anything for free before from us, before Islam. Are we going to allow them to take it now after we became Muslim? It's not going to happen. So Rasul went back and said to those people, sorry, because it was preliminary agreement, said that my people have refused. So just to tell you that asking question and challenging, it's Quran tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had conversation with Iblis, yani. And Iblis asking and Allah responding and why and this and that, yani. All of this are lessons for us, is that first of all, we're highly encouraged to ask questions, of course, politely. And we shouldn't take anything for granted. Actually, one of the things that hurt us big time in our history is when we start following people blindly, whether scholars or ruler or somebody, just obeying, and stop asking questions and stop challenging and stopped asking for evidence or proof. So it's a part of the reform that needs to be done, is to create this critical minds, critical thinking, and keep asking the question why. Why is this and why that? Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he tells us something, he explains it. Why Allah is explaining? Why Allah doesn't tell us just do this and that's it? الخمر إنما فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس وإثمهما أكبر من نفعهما. I'm forbidding or prohibiting this on you because it is harmful or it is damaging, etc. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains, what's the lesson we get from that in Quran? That we should not take anything for granted from anybody. And if shaitan was allowed to ask Allah and Allah answers, and then if in a very different context, and the companions were allowed to ask the Prophet, and the Prophet was not offended, who else can come and say, no, just you need to follow and quietly and don't ask and don't challenge? No. So you're gonna have to raise generation. And alhamdulillah, in this country, the schools are helping, because the school education system produces people with personality, with strong personality, with their strong opinions, and then with critical thinking and even creative thinking. and that's why don't never be offended when your child, even when they are very little, ask why or why not, etc. Because they're not like you. Many of us were raised in an environment where we have to accept everything. No, these people are in free societies, and they are encouraged to do that with their professors, with their boss, with their everybody.
If I can change the subject, Dr. Suhail, what is the tafsir of ayah وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ? And what is the reason for سبب النزول for this verse?
ولا تلقوا بأيديكم إلى التهلكة. Let's get the verse. وأنفقوا في سبيل الله ولا تلقوا بأيديكم إلى التهلكة وأحسنوا إن الله يحب المحسنين. I mean, different ways it can be understood. This is Surah Baqarah, verse 195. Not sure the translation right now. Somebody can pull the translation. It's Baqarah 195. وَأَنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. I mean, if you look at the context, it's the context of spending. So spend in the way of Allah. وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. Let's see, try to get the translation. وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. This is Quran. And,
Assalamu alaikum. Can I read the translation?
Go ahead.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. And spend of your substance in the cause of Allah, and make not your own hands contribute to your destruction, but do good, for Allah loveth those who do good.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. The context is basically that refraining from spending is bad. Basically, you cause yourself harm while you think you're doing yourself good. So spend, and then comes this وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. In the context of the verse is that because then came back to say وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. So it was sandwiched between أَنْفِقُوا وَأَحْسِنُوا. The context of the verse is that refraining from spending, which may look as something good, that you're doing yourself a favor because you're keeping the money for yourself. The verse is saying that you are actually doing yourself harm. تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, if you refrain from doing that. That's one. Another meaning that was, used sometimes is that don't put yourself in harm's way. لا تلقوا بأيديكم إلى التهلكة. Like, for example, somebody who's driving very aggressively, that's تلقوا بأيديكم إلى التهلكة, that you're putting yourself in harm's way. So it can be the context itself, and probably the more obvious meaning is that refraining from spending fi sabilillah may look on the surface that you're doing something good, you're doing yourself a favor, but this verse is saying actually you're causing yourself a harm when you're doing it. And we have seen it. We have seen it time and again. Those who spend fi sabilillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah, bless their wealth, bless their health, their family, etc. Subhanallah, yani, in amazing ways. And Allah promised through his messenger that wealth does not decrease by charity. Actually, it's the other way around. It's like it becomes more pure and therefore more blessed as you spend, pay zakat, and you spend fi sabilillah. It's a mind-changing mindset, because, I mean, in our minds, I mean, if you're gonna use the logic, the materialistic logic, keeping money for yourself, keeping your money for yourself and not spending it, is there something good or doing yourself a favor? The Islamic approach is exactly the opposite. It's you're corrupting that money. You are depriving yourself and you're from the blessing of Allah and the barakah, and then you're causing yourself more harm than good. And that's in this life, not never mind the hereafter. And
But
the
I just
tahluka here can include both this life and then the hereafter, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إن الذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقون في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم يوم يحمى عليه في نار جهنم فتكوى بها جباههم وجنوبهم وظهورهم هذا ما كنزتم لأنفسكم فذوقوا ما كنتم تكنزون. That refraining from spending in the way of Allah, it's not only it's causes harm in this life and in the hereafter. Yes, someone wanted to say something.
yes, I just wanted to add. I mean, the ayah, with the, regardless of the sabab nuzul or the why it was revealed, it's just mentioned harm is not good. I mean, don't do anything that harm you.
Yeah.
It's kind of, if you look at the maqasid, the goals of this ayah, so anything that harm people or harm yourself should be avoided. I mean, it's just in that type of understanding. So, I mean, it could be, if you read the sabab nuzul, what was, it was in the different, maybe reality, where people, it says in the, if you read it, it's in the Ansar and the Medina, and there was no rain or something. But in general, in our life, it's anything that harms the people should be avoided. And I mean, if we apply it these days, if we see like people attacking schools with arms, with weapons, maybe weapons can cause to tahlika. If people spreading, selling some kind of drugs that can maybe harm people, this will lead to tahlika. So anything like any ideas that can cause danger to people, same thing. So I think it's a general rule that we may apply it in different categories. Wallahu alam.
That's true. It's this religion came to preserve life and human dignity, and to secure the peace, and anything that disrupts the life of people should be avoided. Not only you shouldn't do it if it causes harm to you or to others, but also you should work against it if that phenomenon exists in the society, if there is. So, and that applies to everything in Islam. Anything that Allah prohibits is harmful. And your job is not to avoid it only, that's the minimum, but also to work against it. And that's the Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. It's anything that is harmful, you don't do it. Like, for example, I mentioned the example of driving. Muhammad mentioned the examples of those incidents that takes place in schools, and the fact that arms and weapons are so available. So it's not only you don't do what causes you harm or causes others harm, but also you should be advocating against anything that causes harm to people, not only to yourself. Because sometimes we have this attitude that we don't get involved only in things that are harming our community, but anything that is harmful in the society, Muslims should be at the forefront of working against it. The verses that I read are from Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 9, and verses 34. They start from 34. Tell those who hoard, they just keep for themselves gold and silver, instead of giving in Allah's cause, that they will have grievous punishment on the day it is heated up in hell's fire and used to brand their foreheads, sides, and backs. They will be told, this is what you hoarded up for yourselves. Now feel the pain of what you hoarded. So you can see that it is tahluka, not only in this life, but not only in this life and in the day of judgment. So, and just to confirm what Brother Muhammad said, you are not allowed to put yourself in harm's way, and that applies because there is a very unique principles in Islam, is that everything belongs to Allah and you are only managing it. And that applies to your money, applies to your body, to your health, to your time. There is no such thing in Islam that this is mine and they can do whatever they want with it. You can't. So if you're doing something that harms your health, you're committing a sin, big sin, because that's not yours. This is a body that was given to you as a trust from Allah, and that's why in Islam you're not allowed to take your life. You take your own lives, and you're not allowed to use your money in a wrong way or to squander your money because it's not yours. And actually, the community is given the right. I mean, in an Islamic environment, is to take those money from someone who's squandering them. لا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم التي جعل الله لكم قياما وارزقوهم فيها واكسوهم وقولوا لهم قولا معروفا. So it's a big, anything in your hands, it's a trust, and you're going to be asked about it. So wasting time, wasting money, conducting very unhealthy life or unhealthy habits, eating unhealthy, or not taking good care of your body, that's not something that Muslim, it's not your right. And doing these things with the proper intention, doing the right thing with the proper intention, will be like as ibadah. So if you're working out, if you're eating healthy, and you're doing that with the proper intentions, that becomes an act of worship. And your time, efficient management of your time, unfortunately, we tend to waste a lot of time. A lot of time is wasted, and so efficient management of your time, your money, all of these are trust. They're given to you, and you're going to be asked about them. So لا تلقوا بأيديكم للتهلكة can encompass that, which is you don't do anything that is harmful with your body, or with your health, harmful to you or to others. Like the people who are smoking, they're causing harm to themselves and to others.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahel. Actually, the question not from me, it's from one guy. He's in Syria right now, but he cannot join us in Zoom. He said about this ayah, وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إلى التهلكة that الشيخ أبو أيوب الأنصاري الصحابي الجليل he did tafsir in different way and Muawiyah he did tafsir in different way. He said, can we change the tafsir of tafsir Abu Ayyub to the tafsir you just mentioned? I don't know. I think we can, but what do you think about this point?
It's very embarrassing for us. I mean, we should be ashamed of ourselves that until now, when it comes to the tafsir of the Quran, we are relying on the tafsir that was done 100 years ago, as if these people, they have brains and we don't. That's totally wrong. I totally encourage people to reflect on the Quran and try to extract more meanings. Yes, we can use the tafsir that are there already, but not limiting ourselves to those. And yes, we have the ability and the right to choose among those tafsir or to add other possible interpretation. I always distinguish between two things. Fatwa is only for scholars. I mean, to give a fatwa to say this is halal or this is haram, no, you cannot based on and your understanding of one verse here or one hadith there. No, that's a whole knowledge. It's like you cannot do surgery by reading a couple of medicine books, and you can't. So that's different. Fatwa is for people who have that comprehensive knowledge, but the reflection on verses and hadith, it's the duty, and it's a must, and it's a possible for every Muslim. People should be encouraged that I study, I read the Quran. Yes, I can start with the tafsir that is already there, like Abu Ayyub, Muawiyah, and every verse you will find like 3 or 4 interpretations. Sometimes they have no relationship between them. Qala Qatada, Qala Mujahid, Qala, and everybody says a lot of time they say very different things. And then somebody comes, especially the Salafi school, comes and say, that's it. We just have to limit ourselves to those interpretations, and we cannot even choose among them. We just have to read them, but these are contradictory. There are very different interpretations. So no, reflection on the Quran, it's very highly encouraged. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا, Allah is inviting us. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Allah is saying, it's like when وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, it's like when your professor explains something and ask for questions or ask for thoughts or challenge new ideas. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we made this Quran easy. So who is reflecting and who has something to say? قَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. So no reflecting, we can read the tafsir that is there, and there is hardly any verse that you don't have like 5 or 6 different interpretations about it. قال ابن عباس, قال مجاهد, قال معاوية, this Abu Ayyub, this one explained this way. You find 5 or 6 interpretation, and a lot of time they're very different. We should be working on developing our interpretations of the Quran, using those that already exist, but not limiting ourselves by any means. But we should either select the one that is more appropriate for our context, or also coming up with our own interpretation. Again, I'm talking about reflection and then possible interpretations, not about fatwa. So we need to distinguish between the two. Reflecting, studying the Quran is the duty of every believer, and every believer can do it. A lot of us, when we came here, we didn't have the English language. When we are told that's required, we mastered. And when you go to take a bachelor degree, they will tell you, this is how many courses that you have to take, and this is how many credits, that's a minimum GPA, and we made it, we did it. If we have the same, if we are serious about the Quran, the way we're serious about our degrees or our etc., we can do it. Quran is not mystery. It's gonna take somebody who's serious and do the effort. Like take it like any textbook that you have taken before. have your notebooks, whether it is paper or electronic, and then start studying and search and ask, like you did with in school, or what people are doing in school. Nowadays, they go attend the lecture and then watch I don't know how many videos they watch, how many problems they solve, etc., to master that concept. I mean, if people are doing it with their study, shouldn't we do it with the Quran?
جزاك الله كل خير دكتور سهيل. If nobody has any other question, we see you next Sunday إن شاء الله.
Inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
Assalamu
وبركاته.
alaikum wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, jazakumullah khair. Thank
I mean,
you.
if you find this is useful, please invite people. I mean, I'm okay. It's not about having more people attending, but if you think it is beneficial and others can benefit from it, try next time to come with someone. Invite people to attend. Inshallah.
جزاك الله كل خير.
وإياك.
السلام عليكم.
Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
ايه شيخي. مظبوط، هو ما قال لك الكلام مظبوط، قال لك خذ فيهم، بس هلا هو طب ماشي مظبوط كلامك، مظبوط ما بتبدل، هو ما قال لك بتبدلوا، لك يا اخي ما قال لك هو. لحظة. طب لحظة لسكت دقيقة.